Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. Elara trudged across the dooky iced grass surrounding the pack's communal fire pit, her footsteps echoing with the loneliness that had followed her for years. The early morning sky glimmered with muted shades of pink and purple as the sun struggled to break through the horizon. It was the hour when most werewolves would either be returning from their midnight patrols, tired yet proud to have guarded the land, or rising for the day with vigorous yawns and playful grins. Elara belonged to neither group. She was awake out of habit, pacing the edges of a society that did not truly embrace her, though they tolerated her presence as the pack's only omega who could not shift. Every other wolf of her age was well past their first transformation, yet she remained frozen in her unshifted state, a mystery no one had managed to solve. Her thoughts played on a never-ending loop in her mind, but she fought to keep them under control. She knew pitying herself was useless, and that any tears would go unnoticed by a community that believed she was too frail to be of importance. Over the years, she had tried to stifle the bitterness in her heart by turning to the natural world that surrounded the pack's territory. The forest's tall pines, the rustling leaves, the ripple of streams that crisscrossed through the land, all of it offered her a silent companionship she found more genuine than her interactions with most of the pack. With nimble fingers, she tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear, a habit that always reminded her of her own differences. Her hair was softer than most of the females in the pack, a reflection of her lack of a shifting form, and her eyes, an unassuming shade of gray, never lit with the luminous glow that marked a powerful wolf. She felt bland in a world of striking creatures, an outsider who hadn't even been chosen by the moon to share in the gift of a wolf's pelt. Still, she was determined not to let her own doubts consume her every waking moment. She refused to be defined solely by what she couldn't do. All around, the settlement was a testament to the pack's solidarity and sense of shared identity. Wooden cabins with wide porches and big windows dotted the clearing. A communal gathering hall stood at the center, built of sturdy timbers and stone, and it served as the heart of pack life. Every morning, laughter, conversation, and the aroma of breakfast wafted from it. The pack members who had families greeted each other with warm smiles, and children scampered across the yard in playful chase. Elara knew that at any moment, the daily routines would begin in earnest. The stronger wolves off to patrol, the younger ones to train, and those with specialized tasks heading to the infirmary or supply huts. She prepared herself for the usual glances of curiosity or pity, expecting to hover on the periphery once again. Just when she thought she might sneak away to avoid the chatter, a familiar voice called out. Nadia, a healer in training, motioned her over with a careful wave. Nadia was a rare friend among the pack, someone who saw Elara beyond her inability to shift. "Morning, Elara," Nadia said in a subdued tone, as though she worried anyone else might overhear and interject with snide remarks. "I was wondering if you could help me gather herbs from the forest. I need to replenish the stocks before the visiting pack arrives for the territorial meeting." The mention of a visiting pack made Elara's stomach clench. She had almost forgotten that tonight was the start of the negotiations between her pack and another group. The idea of seeing more wolves, particularly alphas with keen senses who would likely notice her unusual condition, turned her uneasy, but she found herself nodding, grateful for a task to ground herself. "Of course, I'd be happy to help," she replied, letting a small smile form. "Where should we start?" Nadia's eyes lit up, revealing hints of genuine appreciation. "Let's try the meadow near the waterfall. I need some of the rarer flowers that only grow in that moist soil," and I could use another pair of hands. You know how those vines can be a hassle." So the two set off along a narrow footpath that wound its way through the towering pines. As they walked, the hush of the forest and the light crunch of the undergrowth beneath their boots felt like a comforting lullaby. Nadia was quicker, her eyes darting about in search of plants she recognized, while Elara tried to follow directions and spot the necessary ingredients. Between the ferns and the mossy logs, they found pockets of wild blossoms, their petals tinted with soft yellows and whites. The sun rose higher, sending beams of golden light through the canopy. Nadia occasionally tucked a plant into her satchel, her brow crinkling with concentration as she mentally assessed the needs of the infirmary. Elara tried to join in, assisting wherever she could. She took careful note of how her friend chose only the healthiest specimens, leaving younger ones behind to regrow. It was a lesson in respect for nature, a principle many wolves held close to their hearts. Eventually, they reached the meadow. The melodic roar of the waterfall in the distance lent the area a dreamy backdrop. Lush greenery stretched out before them, and the dew clinging to leaves sparkled under the morning sun. Elara could see the bright color of blossoms they needed. Nadia led the way, crouching near a cluster of plants with elongated leaves and small, bell-shaped flowers. "Elara, see if you can gather some of those blue petals near the water," Nadia instructed gently. "I'll harvest these stems here." Elara obeyed. As she moved closer to the stream, the ground grew soft, and the sound of rushing water filled her ears. Despite the forest's beauty, a part of her mind wandered to thoughts of the visiting pack. Her own group's territory was well known for its abundant natural resources and strategic location. She suspected the visitors wanted to forge alliances or negotiate boundaries. Alphas often came with imposing auras, commanding presence, and iron wills. Over the years, Elara had learned to shrink under such intense energies, afraid her failings would become the subject of scrutiny. She dreaded the moment when their curious eyes might fall on her, a full-grown Omega who had never shifted. Her heart thudded at the memory of past rejections. Other packs sometimes visited, and inevitably someone would notice. Rumors spread quickly, and she endured pitying stares and whispered jibes. It left her with a persistent sense of inadequacy that felt heavier than any physical burden. Gathering flowers was such a mundane activity, yet it gave her solace. She could disappear into the task, focusing on the textures and fragrances instead of her worries. She knelt near the edge of the water. Her reflection wavered in the current, distorted yet familiar. She let out a sigh and tried to focus on the delicate petals, pinching each one carefully and setting them into a small leather pouch. As she worked, her thoughts shifted again to a faint hope, one she barely dared acknowledge. In the werewolf world, there were stories of late bloomers, wolves, who discovered their shift at an unexpected age. Could she be one of them? Or was she truly doomed to remain in this limited form? "Find anything good?" Nadia's voice broke through the quiet. Elara swallowed her turbulent thoughts. "Plenty of petals. This should be enough for you, right?" Nadia brushed stray hairs away from her brow and closed her satchel with a satisfied nod. "That's a good haul. Let's head back." Then her gaze softened. "I know you're nervous about the visiting pack. If you want, I can introduce you to some of the friendlier wolves, maybe lighten the mood. Or we can hide out in the kitchen and busy ourselves helping the cooks. I have a few recipes in mind that might impress our guests." Touched by her friend's thoughtfulness, Elara attempted a gracious smile. "That sounds wonderful, but I'll manage. Besides, I don't want you to feel like you have to babysit me. I'll help wherever the pack needs me, and maybe I can slip away if things get too intense." On their trek back, the sky turned a pale blue, and the breeze carried the hint of warmer weather. The sounds of the forest began to merge with the distant chatter of pack life. Through the gaps in the trees, Elara noticed a small group of wolves gathered near the communal hall. Among them stood Gavin, a recently anointed beta known for his sharp eyes and imposing silhouette. As soon as he spotted them, he beckoned them over with an eager wave. "The visiting party arrived earlier than expected," he informed, voice taut with urgency. "Our Alpha wants everyone to gather at the clearing for a formal welcome. Elara, your presence is required too, since the entire pack is being introduced." His eyes flickered with the slightest hint of pity, but he kept his tone official. "Better get ready." An anxious flutter seized Elara's stomach, but she simply nodded. Nadia gave her a reassuring squeeze on the arm before they parted ways. Nadia headed for the infirmary, while Elara hurried to her cabin. She changed into a clean tunic and leggings, trying to smooth out her disheveled hair. A shaky breath left her lips as she stepped outside, forging a path to the clearing where she knew the entire pack would already be assembling. Her pack members were arranged in neat lines, forming a semicircle around a slightly elevated platform. The Alpha stood in front, shoulders broad, head held high. Elara slipped into position at the very edge of the group, hoping to blend in enough to not draw notice. She was only partially successful. Curiosity swam in the eyes of the newcomers as they took in the sight of her pack. Some beta wolves brimming with confidence, a handful of sturdy enforcers, and a range of others each fulfilling a role. Then their glances paused when they spotted her, a slender young woman whose posture betrayed unease. It was almost imperceptible, but Elara felt the weight of their scrutiny. Their Alpha stepped forward. He was a tall man, with a presence as solid as a mountainside. His hair was cropped short, and faint scars traced along his right temple. He raised his voice to address the visitors. "Welcome to our territory. We hope the negotiations will be fruitful. We've prepared lodging for your delegation in the western cabins, close to the pines. Tonight we will feast and share our stories around the bonfire. We look forward to understanding each other's aims and forging stronger bonds." The leader of the visiting pack responded, equally imposing. He was older, perhaps in his early 40s, with the bearing of a seasoned warrior. His eyes, a pale hazel, gleamed under the midday sun. "We appreciate your hospitality. My name is Havoc, and I trust our stay will encourage mutual respect. We've traveled a great distance, so my wolves and I are grateful for any kindness you extend." To Elara's quiet surprise, the visitors' group parted slightly, revealing a younger man who stood just behind Havoc. He was tall with a strong build, and the faint stubble along his jaw hinted at a life spent on constant patrol. His gaze surveyed the crowd with a keen focus until it settled on Elara. She felt a tingling under her skin, as if she had been singled out amid countless faces. Something in his posture suggested he was no ordinary member of the entourage. The raw strength in his stance, the set of his broad shoulders, and a subtle air of authority made her suspect he was a warrior of some rank, maybe a guard or enforcer. Strangely, as their eyes met, a flicker of understanding passed between them, lasting only an instant before it was gone, replaced by the general formalities of the event. The introductions concluded with polite acknowledgments and subdued applause, prompting the pack to disperse. Some of the visitors and hosts immediately began conversing, exchanging stories of their journeys. Elara wished to retreat, but she found her feet rooted in place, compelled by the magnetic energy emanating from that newcomer who had met her gaze. She sensed movement at her side, Nadia had come back to guide her gently. "Hey, you okay?" Nadia asked, quietly enough that no one else would hear. "I'm fine," Elara whispered, though her voice felt tight. "Let's go help with the meal preparation." Before they could slip away, however, that warrior strode directly toward them. He paused a few steps away, politely inclining his head. "I'm Arden," he said, voice low. Despite the softness in his tone, an undercurrent of power radiated from him. "I'm one of Havoc's chief enforcers. I was asked to coordinate security with your beta, but I also like to meet the locals myself, learn a bit about them." Nadia clasped her hands together in polite courtesy. "I'm Nadia, a healer in training. This is Elara. She helps a lot with..." Elara mustered a polite smile, though her pulse fluttered. She was always nervous about how others introduced her. "I help around wherever I'm needed," she finished, trying to maintain composure. "It's nice to meet you, Arden. I hope you find our territory welcoming." Arden's gaze lingered, warm but curious. "I can sense the strong bond your pack shares. Your territory is beautiful, and I'm sure it has secrets that only you locals know. Perhaps you can show me around during my stay." Elara felt her cheeks grow hot at the unexpected invitation. She wasn't used to such direct attention, especially from an enforcer of another pack. "If you'd like, though I'm sure there are others more qualified to show you around," she replied, hearing the self-doubt seep into her words. Immediately she regretted it, but he only regarded her with patient acceptance. "Sometimes it's not about qualifications," Arden said. "It's about seeing a place through genuine eyes." Then he nodded a goodbye and turned to speak with a few of her pack's warriors, presumably about the upcoming negotiations. Nadia gave Elara a sidelong grin. "Looks like someone's found you interesting," she teased, only half joking. "More like I was an oddity in the lineup," Elara said, her voice hushed and tinged with embarrassment. "He's probably sizing us all up for security reasons." Nadia arched an eyebrow. "That's not the vibe I got." Elara didn't want to dwell on it. They headed to the main hall's back kitchen entrance where a flurry of activity awaited. Large pots of stew simmered on the wide cooking range. The clink of utensils mingled with the chatter of wolves hurriedly preparing for the feast. Thick loaves of bread lined the counters, and fresh produce from the surrounding farmland was being chopped and stirred into a variety of dishes. Elara rolled up her sleeves and joined the bustle, grateful for the distraction. She helped slice vegetables, arrange platters of meats and cheeses, and fetch ingredients from the pantry as needed. The repetitive tasks lulled her anxieties, giving her hands something tangible to do, while her mind sorted through the earlier encounter. She couldn't stop thinking about the faint connection she had felt when Arden's gaze locked onto hers. It wasn't romantic exactly, more like an unspoken recognition that she was a puzzle piece in his field of vision. She reprimanded herself for reading too much into it. He was probably just being courteous, or maybe he sensed her insecurity and wanted to ease it. She had always believed that if she was to have any significant connection, it would be with someone who understood her limitations intimately, someone from her own pack who witnessed her daily struggle. Yet no one in her pack had ever shown her more than superficial kindness, aside from Nadia. Over the years, Elara had accepted a self-imposed isolation, figuring it was the simplest way to avoid heartbreak. As afternoon wore on, the sun rose to its zenith, casting bright light through the high windows. The aroma of hearty soups and spiced meats filled the large hall, and her muscles ached pleasantly from the day's labor. In a brief lull, Nadia approached with 2 steaming bowls. "We deserve a break," she declared, handing Elara one. Let's eat outside on the porch." With grateful nods, they retreated to a small patch of shade just beyond the open door. There, they settled on a low wooden bench. As Elara sipped the warm soup, she mulled over the new tension coursing through the pack. The negotiations were a big deal. Any shift in territorial lines could lead to alliances or rivalries that could reshape everyone's future. The presence of a contingent of strong warriors also reminded her of the pack's vulnerability. If the discussions turned sour, conflict might spark. They hadn't been sitting for more than a few minutes when Elara caught sight of Arden emerging from the hall, speaking quietly with Gavin. He nodded curtly at something the beta said, then his gaze drifted, finding her once again as if drawn by an unseen thread. Her breath caught, a mild sense of wonder flickering in her mind. She quickly tore her eyes away, focusing resolutely on her half-empty bowl. Nadia's quiet laugh nudged her. "He's looking at you again." Elara groaned, in equal parts uncomfortable and intrigued. "Don't read into it," she said. "He's probably just verifying if I look like I can handle a short tour. He wants to see the territory, remember?" Her friend gave a playful shrug. "If you say so." They finished their meal and slipped back into their chores. By the time the sun dipped low on the horizon, the entire pack prepared for the evening feast. Long wooden tables had been moved outside, forming a large open-air seating area under strings of lanterns and colorful flags. Children ran around, chasing each other while squealing with excitement. Musicians tested the strings of their instruments, ensuring they were in tune for the night's performances. The forest's gentle breeze carried the scent of roasting meat, fresh bread, and fragrant herbs, blending with the slightest hint of pine. Elara helped arrange utensils and cups, taking extra care with the table designated for the visiting dignitaries. Her hands trembled, remembering how gatherings like this often led to her feeling out of place. The swirl of excitement and celebration was something she wanted to enjoy, yet she never felt fully welcomed. Still, she tried to stay focused. She wanted to do her part. Once she finished her tasks, she positioned herself at the periphery, quietly observing. Her solitude was broken when her own alpha, imposing in presence, though not unkind, approached to greet Havoc and his party. The older visitor introduced a few of his subordinates, one of whom was Arden, standing off to the side with an expression of watchful interest. The official toasts commenced. Elara listened as her alpha spoke of unity, praising the long-standing traditions of werewolf packs gathering to settle disputes peacefully. Havoc responded with appreciation, his gravelly voice carrying over the crowd, emphasizing the shared history and the possibility of forging deeper trust. Their words were met with applause and raised cups, everyone hoping the formalities would set a positive tone for tomorrow's negotiations. As wolves began to eat and converse more casually, music filled the air. A few couples took to dancing, swirling around the clearing in light-hearted motions. Children giggled and ran between the dancing adults, occasionally scolded by exasperated parents. Elara lingered at the edges, feeling uncharacteristically restless. Something about the evening, maybe the presence of so many new faces, unsettled her. She decided to slip away to the quieter part of the grounds, not wanting her internal turmoil to distract from the festivities. She made her way toward the large oak at the northern edge of the clearing. Its branches created a natural canopy of leaves, offering a respite from the torches and chatter. She inhaled deeply, trying to calm her mind. More than anything, she yearned for the power to shift, to stand among her packmates as an equal. Yet that dream felt impossibly distant. A soft crunch of grass alerted her to another presence. She glanced over her shoulder and found Arden stepping toward her, his approach careful, as though he sensed her unease. "It's a lively celebration," he observed, his voice a gentle rumble that oddly soothed her. "I saw you leave and thought you might want some company, or, if you prefer to be alone, I can give you space." Elara shifted her weight, unsure of what to say. Before she could respond, a sudden scream shattered the night air. It was a raw, panicked cry that froze everyone in place. The music stopped mid-note, and conversations died instantly. A few seconds later, another shriek pierced the silence, this one coming from the far side of the clearing where the thick forest began. Her heart kicked. Instinctively, a flurry of motion erupted as wolves jumped from their seats, eyes scanning the darkness. The Alpha barked commands, and the pack's enforcers sprinted toward the source of the noise. Arden reacted immediately, the tension in his shoulders coiling, ready to spring into action. Elara stood rooted, shocked. "Stay here," he said firmly, though not unkindly. "I'll see what's going on." But she couldn't hold herself back. Something deep inside her flared with concern. She recognized that scream. It belonged to a young girl named Perrin, who was just entering her teen years and often wandered too close to the boundaries. Elara had occasionally helped watch over her at the communal hall. Without a second thought, Elara followed Arden, her heart hammering. She cursed her lack of a wolf form, fully aware she wouldn't be as fast or as strong as the others, but still she ran, adrenaline pushing her forward. They pushed through a cluster of pines to find a scene of confusion. Perrin was trembling near a tree trunk, eyes wide with terror. A fallen lantern at her feet had set some dried leaves aflame, illuminating the vicinity with eerie shadows. The faint silhouette of a stranger lurked in the background. A rogue wolf not wearing any of the visiting pack's usual attire. In the flickering light, Elara glimpsed the intruder's half-shifted features, claws extended, teeth bared in a snarl. He looked feral, consumed by some primal rage. It was impossible to tell if he was alone or part of a bigger threat. Arden moved between the girl and the rogue with lightning speed, dropping into a defensive posture. A growl rumbled in his throat, less a sound than a warning. Just then, several pack enforcers led by Gavin burst into the clearing. The rogue realized he was outnumbered and let out a guttural snarl before whirling around, disappearing into the dense brush with shocking agility. "After him!" Gavin shouted, and half the enforcers took off in pursuit. A few stayed behind, scanning the perimeter. Arden crouched by Perrin, checking for injuries. Elara joined him, her hands fluttering, wanting to console the child but unsure how to help. Perrin sobbed out, "I was just wandering around near the edge. He came out of nowhere. He tried to grab me." Her words gave way to hiccuping gasps. Elara gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You're safe now," she murmured. "Let's get you back." Arden carefully lifted Perrin into his arms, mindful of her trembling. Together they navigated back to the main clearing, where stunned wolves waited. The music had fallen silent, replaced by anxious murmurs. The Alpha's brow was set in a deep frown. He signaled for Nadia, who hurried over to check on Perrin. Arden gave a brief report of what happened, and the Alpha nodded grimly. "This is not acceptable," the Alpha declared, voice loud enough to carry over the crowd. "We'll find out who that rogue was and ensure our pack remains secure. Everyone must stay alert." Havik offered a curt bow, stepping forward with controlled urgency. "My wolves and I will assist in patrolling. Our presence might have drawn out old enemies, or perhaps this is an unrelated threat, but we'll stand with you. We want no harm to come to your territory while we're here." Tension rippled through the gathering as wolves murmured among themselves. Fear lingered in the flickering lantern light, overshadowing the festive air that had prevailed only moments ago. Elara, still shaken, noticed the concern etched onto Arden's features. He locked eyes with her as if to confirm she was safe, then turned to Havoc to receive instructions. Some wolves tried to salvage the evening, leading a few children away from the scene. Others insisted on forming extra patrols. Though the official feast continued in subdued fashion, the carefree mood was gone. Alarmed whispers replaced laughter, and a watchful stillness descended. Elara hovered near the edge again, uncertain what to feel. A swirl of dread filled her chest. This incident could threaten the negotiations, especially if more rogues were prowling the borders. Worse, it proved the territory was not as secure as everyone had believed. In the darkness, the celebratory lanterns seemed oddly bright, as though mocking the pack's vulnerability. Elara shifted from foot to foot, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She found her gaze drawn back to Arden, who was speaking quietly with a cluster of pack warriors, offering advice on patrol patterns. Despite the underlying tension, there was an unspoken composure in his demeanor that coaxed a measure of reassurance. She admired how calm and proactive he was in the face of danger. Part of her wanted to approach him, to ask questions about how she could help, but her anxieties rooted her in place. Eventually, the Alpha announced that the official gatherings for the night would wind down. Everyone was to get some rest because the negotiations would still begin early the next day. Patrols were doubled, and a few of the visitors promised to stand guard throughout the night. Heaving a tired sigh, Elara made her way to her cabin, the adrenaline slowly fading. Tonight's events had rattled her more than she cared to admit. She thought about Perrin's terror-filled eyes, that rogue's snarling face. She couldn't shake the sense that something more sinister lurked beneath the surface. She also couldn't forget how Arden had placed himself protectively in front of the child, a reflex that seemed ingrained. That fleeting moment stirred something in her chest, a mix of relief and curiosity. Once inside, she sank onto her small bed, rubbing her temples. The cabin was modest but cozy, furnished with a wooden dresser, a little table, and a single chair. A single lamp illuminated the space, casting wavering shadows on the walls. Often, her nights ended much the same, alone in her thoughts, with only the hum of nighttime crickets for company. The difference tonight was a faint but lingering spark, the memory of the intense glow in Arden's eyes. She disliked her own yearning for validation, yet she recognized it was there, an ember of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone saw more in her than a weak Omega. Even if that hope was fleeting, it was enough to stir her heart. She let her eyes drift shut, but sleep was slow to come. 1,000 worries circled her mind, the negotiations, the rogue attack, her desire for acceptance, her confusion about her new acquaintance. She wondered if tomorrow would bring answers, or only deepen the uncertainties swirling around her fate. When rest finally overtook her, her dreams were laced with half-imagined shapes in the forest, and one pair of vigilant eyes that never left her side. Elara woke before dawn, her night of sleep plagued by disjointed dreams that left her feeling restless. Despite the heaviness in her limbs, she forced herself to rise, fueling her determination with a sense of duty. She dressed quickly in a simple tunic and trousers, braided her hair to keep it out of her face, then slipped on a pair of sturdy boots. The negotiations would be starting early, and the air around the pack was already thick with anticipation. She wanted to make herself useful somehow, even if her role was just to ensure no detail was overlooked. As she stepped outside, she noticed that watchmen still patrolled the perimeter. The tension from the rogue attack lingered in every glance they exchanged. A few greeted her with curt nods, others avoided eye contact, consumed by their vigilance. From a distance, She saw that the once joyous clearing had been tidied. The tables and lanterns were gone, replaced by a large circle of chairs set up near the communal hall for the talks. 2 betas were busy double-checking positions, conferring in hushed voices. She made her way to the infirmary, her mind on Perrin. Nadia had stayed up most of the night observing the girl, making sure she was calm and uninjured. Elara found the healer stifling a yawn as she packed a leather bag with gauze and herbal ointments. "Good morning," Elara said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "How is she?" Nadia rubbed her bleary eyes. "She's shaken, but okay. No serious harm. She'll need time to recover from the shock, but physically she's fine. She's asleep now." Elara exhaled with relief. She couldn't rid herself of the mental image of the rogue's snarling face. "Thank goodness. The negotiations start soon. Is there anything I can do here?" "You can help me restock the supplies," Nadia said, gesturing toward the shelf. "Arden and the other visitors are going to help patrol again today, just in case. I want to make sure we're prepared if anyone comes back injured." Elara nodded, setting to work. While she sewed bandages and arranged vials of antiseptic, her thoughts drifted to Arden. She tried to focus on how beneficial it was that he and his fellow enforcers were offering extra protection, but she kept remembering the intensity in his eyes from the night before. A reluctant curiosity spurred her, as though some invisible tether drew her thoughts to him whenever her mind quieted. She brushed the feeling aside, telling herself it was simply because he had been the first to step up in a crisis. No one else outside her immediate circle had ever shown her that kind of selfless concern, not without simultaneously reminding her of her rank at the bottom of the pack hierarchy. She was finishing up when Nadia placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You have that dreamy look in your eyes," she teased, though her voice was kind. "Care to share?" Elara felt color blossom on her cheeks. "It's not what you think," she protested weakly, then dropped her gaze. "I'm just worried. What if last night's attack was a sign of something bigger?" Nadia studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. "It's possible. Rogues usually don't trespass on pack land unless they're desperate or part of a bigger plan. Our border patrols are strong, though. We'll figure out what's going on." They continued working until the sound of hushed conversation outside told them that the negotiation delegates were gathering. Nadia slung her bag over her shoulder. "I need to be ready in case they need a mediator or quick medical help. You can come along if you'd like, or you can keep yourself occupied in the meantime." Inhaling a shaky breath, Elara decided to follow. She was not officially part of the negotiations, but it couldn't hurt to remain close, observing from a respectful distance. Maybe it would help her feel less powerless. Together, they emerged into the clearing. The chairs had been arranged in a wide circle to accommodate the members of both packs. Her alpha sat facing Havoc. The betas and important advisors formed smaller concentric rings around them. At the edges stood warriors and enforcers, alert to any sign of trouble. A hush fell as the talks began. Havoc started by reiterating the goodwill he and his wolves felt toward Elara's pack, but emphasized that they needed to address the threat of rogues. Her alpha responded with agreement. There was mention of sharing patrol duties and possibly forming an alliance with expanded territory lines to foster mutual protection. As the discussion became more detailed, Elara noticed a few tense expressions among Havoc's subordinates. Some of them clearly worried about losing autonomy or saw the arrangement as unequal. Her alpha's advisors wore similar expressions, indicating concerns over ceding control of certain regions. Through it all, Havoc and her alpha remained composed. Although subtle frictions sparked whenever they mentioned resource distribution or the extent of patrolling boundaries. She tried to listen intently, but her eyes kept drifting to a solitary figure on the perimeter, Arden, standing with arms folded, surveying the gathering. It seemed he was more focused on scanning the tree line for threats than on the negotiations themselves. Occasionally, his gaze swept across the assembled wolves and landed on her. Each time, she felt a flutter deep in her stomach, a combination of curiosity and an unsettling sense of being observed. She couldn't tell if it was worry or something else. An hour or two passed with measured deliberations. No voices were raised, yet the conversation sometimes hit a stalemate, prompting sighs or furrowed brows. Periodically, someone would suggest taking a brief recess to let cooler heads prevail. During one such pause, Elara decided to step away, knowing her presence there was mostly ornamental. She walked toward a small stone bench near the forest's edge, intending to gather her thoughts. She settled down, taking in the rustle of leaves overhead and the gentle chirping of birds. It helped ease the tension swirling in her mind. Then she heard approaching footsteps. Glancing back, she saw Arden heading her way, his expression curious but not intimidating. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "I needed to step away from the formalities for a moment." She gestured for him to sit, trying to maintain a calm composure even as her pulse sped up. "Of course. It's peaceful here." He took a seat beside her, leaving a polite gap. For a moment he seemed content to let the silence linger. Elara tried to read him, noticing the wariness around his eyes, as though he had been on high alert for too long. The scars that lined his hands spoke of more battles than she could imagine. "How are you holding up after last night?" he asked softly. She clasped her fingers in her lap. "I'm all right. I'm glad that child is safe. It's just unnerving to know a rogue was lurking so close." Arden nodded. "Rogues are unpredictable. They often have nothing to lose, which makes them dangerous. When I saw the child, I reacted the only way I know how. Protect first, ask questions later." His gaze flicked toward the circle of negotiators. "I hope these talks accomplish something. All too often, packs close themselves off, believing isolation is safer." Elara's brows knitted together. "But what about independence? Isn't that important too? Many packs resist alliances because they fear losing control of their land." "True, independence matters," Arden replied. "However, refusing to cooperate can leave smaller packs vulnerable. Even large packs struggle against organized threats." His voice trailed off as he examined her face. "You're worried about something else." She managed a small, rueful smile. "I guess I'm worried that we may not be as strong as we think. There are so many things out of our control. And for me, I've always been at a disadvantage." She pressed her lips together, feeling a twinge of shame. "It can be hard to feel strong when you're the only one who can't shift." Arden's expression softened. The inability to shift doesn't negate someone's worth. Strength takes many forms. She studied the hint of compassion in his eyes, momentarily losing her words. She had spent her life enduring pity from others, but from him, it felt different, more like understanding. Before she could delve further, a summons rang out across the clearing, indicating the negotiations were resuming. Arden rose and offered her a hand. She accepted it, her heart pounding as his fingers closed around hers. Once she was on her feet, they released each other, but the warmth of that contact lingered on her skin. They parted ways, each returning to their respective positions. The rest of the morning proceeded with more debates, disagreements, and partial resolutions. By midday, an uneasy ceasefire of opinions was reached. The two alphas agreed to break for lunch, then continue with smaller group discussions in the afternoon. A subdued applause drifted through the gathering, though it felt more like a courtesy than genuine celebration. Nonetheless, the tension eased slightly as wolves moved to share a midday meal. Elara stayed on the outskirts, content to watch from afar. A swirl of complicated feelings took hold inside her: worry for the pack, an odd flicker of hope ignited by her brief conversation with Arden, and the old familiar loneliness. When Nadia came up and handed her a small plate of food, she accepted gratefully but didn't have much appetite. She picked at the bread and cheese, occasionally sipping cool water from a wooden cup. While the others ate and chatted, she drifted to the side, eventually taking refuge under a tall pine that offered shade and privacy. She leaned against the trunk, letting her eyelids flutter shut. Her thoughts conjured images: the rogue's feral eyes, the hush of the forest, Arden's steady presence. Her own feelings churned with confusion, a sensation she couldn't quite name. "Elara?" A voice jolted her from her reverie. She opened her eyes to find Gavin standing there, sporting a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Could you come with me, please? The Alpha wants to organize a small welcome for Havoc and his immediate circle. I need help setting up the private area in the meeting hall." She forced a polite nod, setting aside her jumbled emotions. The beta's request was a chance to do something tangible, to feel useful. Trudging behind him, she returned to the hall, where a handful of wolves were rearranging the large wooden tables into a smaller, more intimate configuration. Candles and vases of forest flowers were being added for a refined touch. Elara helped position chairs, straighten tablecloths, and make sure the setting looked dignified without being too extravagant. Though her hands stayed busy, her mind spun with thoughts of what might happen next. The day was only half over, and the future remained uncertain. She tried to focus on the present moment, pressing wrinkles from a cloth, aligning the centerpieces, ensuring the place was spotless. But stray questions kept drifting in. Would the negotiations end in an alliance that benefited both packs, or would distrust triumph, straining relationships further? And what about the rogue threat lurking somewhere in their territory? Just as she finished setting a floral arrangement, Nadia appeared, tapping her foot in a small gesture of impatience. "You've been at this for too long. Take a breather," she insisted. "Your eyes are starting to glaze over. Come on, let's step outside for a moment." Elara reluctantly followed her friend onto the hall's wooden porch, inhaling a lungful of fresh air. She hadn't realized how cramped the hall felt until she stepped away. "So, are you going to tell me why you're so on edge?" Nadia asked, folding her arms in concern. Elara blew out a breath, shaking her head lightly. "Honestly, it's everything. The rogue attack, the negotiations, me feeling powerless to contribute anything meaningful. I don't even know if I belong at these events, since I can't shift. I'm just the odd one out, the Omega who can't protect herself, or the pack." Nadia frowned. "That's not how I see you. You help in ways most people overlook. You're kind, attentive. You pay attention to small details." She paused, eyeing Elara. "And don't discount the fact that you might still shift one day." Elara attempted a hollow laugh. "I appreciate your hope, but I think I've come to terms with reality. Sometimes, I can't help but imagine how different my life would be if I could shift. I'd have more authority, more confidence. Maybe I'd be able to stand my ground without feeling like a burden. Or maybe you'd still be the sweet, perceptive person you already are, just with a wolf form," Nadia countered. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Speaking of new developments, I've noticed Arden watching you. Care to explain?" A surge of warmth rose to Elara's cheeks. There's nothing to explain. He's just been polite and protective, which is sort of his job. Nadia's lips curved into a tiny smirk. Sure, but I see how your eyes dart in his direction. And he definitely notices you. It might be nothing, or it might be something. Either way, it's worth acknowledging. Elara pressed her lips together, uncertain of her feelings. She didn't want to open herself up to heartbreak or embarrassment. Eventually, she just sighed. "Let's not get carried away," she murmured. "He's just a visitor passing through. Soon enough, he'll return to his pack." Nadia shrugged, dropping the subject. "All right, if you say so. Let's go back inside. We have a dozen last-minute tasks to finish before we can finally rest." They returned to the hall, and Elara buried herself in final preparations, trying to ignore the swirl of emotions roiling in her chest. By late afternoon, Havik and his top advisors arrived at the smaller setup, along with her alpha and a select handful of the pack's senior members. Discussions continued behind closed doors, leaving everyone else in tense anticipation. The hours dragged on, and Elara found herself helping the cooks prepare an early supper for the rest of the pack. She could barely swallow her own meal, nerves tying her stomach in knots. Finally, the meeting ended just as dusk began its slow descent. The outcome was announced in the main clearing to the assembled wolves. A provisional agreement to share patrol responsibilities near the common border, a promise to exchange more frequent communication, and a tentative plan to discuss broader alliances in the future. It wasn't a comprehensive treaty, but it was a positive step. Havik seemed satisfied, as did her alpha. Relief spread through both groups, though an undercurrent of unease remained, likely due to the rogue threat that had not yet been fully addressed. When the announcements concluded, the two alphas parted with respectful nods. Elara watched from a distance as wolves dispersed, each group reviewing their new duties or planning the next day's schedules. She felt a bit like a ghost gliding among the living, her presence largely unnoticed or taken for granted. It was a familiar feeling, one that settled deep in her bones. The heavy clump of boots behind her made her turn. Arden stood there, arms relaxed at his sides. "Looks like the negotiations ended well," he observed quietly. "For now." She studied his face, noticing lines of fatigue etched across his brow. "Yes. We'll see how it goes in the coming days," she replied. She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for all the help you gave my pack. I know you've been working closely with our warriors to keep everyone safe." He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "My alpha entrusted me with that responsibility. Still, there's more to security than stationing guards. We need to figure out where that rogue came from and whether there are more. If you have any insight into the area where the attack happened, trails, caves, anything like that, appreciate it." A quiet internal debate ensued. Elara knew the forest around her home better than most, though she rarely shared that knowledge. The idea of guiding an outsider through the terrain made her anxious, but then she recalled Perrin's terrified screams and realized she owed it to the pack to do whatever she could. "I do know a few hidden spots," she admitted, "including the rocky outcroppings north of the waterfall, where sometimes drifters try to camp unseen. I can show you tomorrow if you think it could help." A glint of gratitude touched Arden's features. "That would be valuable." "Thank you. First thing in the morning? I'll meet you by the eastern gate?" She nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "I'll be there." He parted with a slight nod, melding back into the activity of the clearing. Elara stood there a moment longer, absorbing what she'd just agreed to. She knew the land intimately, better than many pack members who tended to stick to well-worn paths. Her lonely wanderings had given her detailed knowledge of hidden corners. Now, for the first time, she would share those secrets with someone beyond her pack. A swirl of excitement and fear coursed through her as she considered the possibilities. There was no denying the pull she felt toward Arden, and she wondered if time spent alone with him in the forest would clarify her mixed emotions or deepen them further. That night the pack went to bed calmer, if not entirely at ease. Extra patrols were organized, ensuring no repeat of the night before. Some wolves found comfort in the new alliance, while others remained suspicious. Elara prepared for bed with her mind full of hypotheticals. What she might show Arden, how she would handle any potential danger, and how she would keep her emotions reined in. She smoothed her thin blanket over herself, gazing at the ceiling in the flickering lamplight. She tried to guess Arden's past. The faint scars on his arms and the hardened look in his eyes suggested a life of violence and duty. Yet there was kindness in him too, a sort of earnest concern she rarely saw among hardened warriors. Did he see her as simply a source of useful information, or did he sense a deeper bond? She wanted to be cautious. She had been disappointed by fleeting interests before. Still, an ember of hope glowed in her heart, one she couldn't extinguish. Eventually, she let the gentle hum of nighttime insects lull her into a fitful doze, her thoughts drifting between the memory of the rogue's snarl and the memory of Arden's hand closed around hers. Tomorrow would bring new questions and possibly new answers. As she drifted off, she prayed silently to the moon she couldn't fully connect with, hoping for guidance or a sign that she wasn't as broken as she believed. Maybe in the depths of the forest, with Arden by her side, she would find clarity. She needed something, anything, to remind her that there was a reason she had been born with this elusive gift that had yet to awaken. The night enveloped her in a cloak of tentative peace, leaving her to wonder what the dawn would bring. Morning's first light found Elara standing by the eastern gate, her breath curling in the cool dawn air. Thin wisps of mist clung to the undergrowth, giving the forest an ethereal quality. She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting off a mild chill, and replayed in her mind the path she would take Arden on. Although she had guided many of her own pack members during supply runs or herb-gathering expeditions, this situation felt different. Sharing her detailed knowledge with a visitor, no, with a warrior from another pack, stirred nervous excitement in her. She scanned the area, expecting to see Arden stride out from among the cabins or appear with other enforcers, but he arrived alone. His footfalls were nearly silent on the soft ground. A faint smile curved his lips as he closed the distance. "You're an early riser," he noted in a low voice, the timbre still warm from the hush of dawn. "I didn't want to keep you waiting, so I headed out as soon as I finished my assignments for the morning patrol." Elara brushed back a stray strand of hair. "I often wake early," she admitted. "I like the quiet before the pack bustles awake." She hesitated, then gestured toward the dim trail disappearing into the trees. "If you're ready, we can start." He nodded, shouldering a small pack filled with supplies. Together, they slipped into the forest. The pines loomed around them, tall sentinels whispering in a rising breeze. Sunbeams filtered through gaps in the branches, illuminating motes of dust that drifted in lazy patterns. Elara breathed in the rich scent of damp earth and pine needles, an aroma that always comforted her. This time, however, she felt a companionable presence at her side, and that changed the atmosphere entirely. She noticed how Arden's keen gaze constantly roamed, checking shadows and vantage points. Even in these calm, early hours, he treated every step as if danger might lurk behind the next trunk. For a while, neither spoke. Their footsteps made a soft crunch on the bed of needles. Elara led him along a meandering route that veered away from the well-trodden trails, taking shortcuts she had mapped out long ago. Eventually, they reached an old oak with gnarled roots twisted across the path, forcing them to slow. "We are close to the area where the rogue attacked Perrin," she said quietly, as if the hush of the morning demanded a gentle tone. "This stretch of forest has thick undergrowth. Sometimes, wanderers and rogues hide here." Arden crouched to examine broken twigs and faint footprints in the dirt. "These tracks look recent, maybe from last night's patrol. But see here?" He pointed to a deeper imprint. "That might be from someone heavier, someone who was running. It could be a clue, though I can't be certain." She squinted at the marks. They looked like the faint outline of wolf paws, partially overlaid by boots. "I've never been the best tracker," she admitted, "but I do recognize that direction heads toward the rocky bluff behind the waterfall. We'll circle that area." He straightened, his features grimly focused. "Lead on." They pressed deeper into the wilderness. The ground began to slope upward, and the rush of water grew louder. The waterfall itself was still concealed by dense foliage, but they could sense its presence. Sunlight glistened on the occasional patch of moss, and small rivulets trickled over stones worn smooth by years of runoff. Despite the growing tension, Elara felt a gentle sense of peace in these familiar surroundings, as though the forest welcomed her with each breath of wind. In time, the stream appeared, a shallow ribbon of shimmering water flowing over a rocky bed. Elara motioned for Arden to follow her across a series of large flat stones that served as stepping points. Halfway across, she paused, letting him catch up. Up ahead is a narrow path that climbs behind the waterfall. It's tricky in some spots. We'll have to be careful. Arden studied the surroundings with keen interest. "You traverse this path alone?" he asked. There was no judgment in his tone, merely curiosity. She nodded, feeling a slight flush of pride. "I come here often to gather rare plants for Nadia. The spray from the waterfall helps certain herbs thrive. But it's also a good place for someone to hide. The rocks form little alcoves. I wouldn't be surprised if a rogue Ka took advantage of that." He gestured for her to lead the way. They ascended a damp, moss-covered incline, stepping over gnarled roots and loose stones. The thunderous roar of the waterfall drew closer, making conversation nearly impossible. Mist clung to their clothes and hair, leaving a cool sheen on their faces. Water droplets glimmered in Elara's braids like tiny crystals. She moved cautiously, testing each foothold before committing her weight, and Arden matched her pace with fluid ease, his presence a steady reassurance at her back. At last, they emerged onto a small plateau partly sheltered by an overhang of rock. From this vantage point, the waterfall fanned out into a milky cascade that crashed into a swirling pool far below. Rainbows danced in the sun's rays, and the air was alive with the freshness of running water. Elara took a moment to catch her breath, turning to see Arden's reaction. He regarded the vista with quiet awe, then turned to her, a gentle admiration in his gaze. "It's stunning," he said, raising his voice just enough to be heard over the waterfall. "I can see why you spend time here." Elara offered a modest smile, her cheeks warming at the appreciation in his tone. She lifted an arm to point further along the ledge. "Over there, behind that curtain of vines, there's a hidden opening. It leads to a small cave, not very deep, but large enough for a few people to shelter if they don't mind getting soaked." He nodded, scanning the area. "Should we check it?" She swallowed, recalling the last time she explored that dim cavern. It was slippery and dark, but it was a likely place for rogues to hide. We should. They gingerly navigated the slick stone until they reached the hanging vines glistening with spray. Elara pushed them aside, revealing a narrow gap in the rock. The roar of the water intensified, echoing off the walls. Arden went first, lighting a small torch from his pack to illuminate the interior. With hesitant steps, they proceeded into the gloom. The cave smelled of damp earth and algae. Strange formations lined the walls, stalactites curved like jagged teeth overhead, while the floor sloped unpredictably. Water dripped from fissures in the ceiling, forming shallow puddles at their feet. As they advanced, Elara's heart thudded with a mix of unease and curiosity. She had been in here before, but never with the possibility of encountering a hostile presence lurking in the shadows. Arden held the torch high, revealing a cramped space that opened out just a bit further ahead. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. I sensed something faint, like stale perspiration, maybe old blood. It's not fresh. Could be that a rogue used this place recently but moved on. They carefully checked every alcove. Elara's nerves prickled when she spotted a makeshift sleeping area, just an old blanket crumpled in a corner, along with some fragments of dried meat. Someone had definitely stayed here. Arden crouched beside the items, his expression intense. They left in a hurry, or they'd have taken me's. They might have sensed the pack was on high alert after the attack and cleared out. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, a shiver running through her. What if they're still in the area, waiting for another chance? Arden stood, his shoulders taut. We'll alert your Alpha. We can send a patrol team here. At least this cave is known now, so it won't serve as a safe hiding spot anymore. If this rogue was scouting your territory, they'll realize we're onto them. For a moment, a tangled fear gripped Elara. The idea of an unknown assailant, driven by aggression or desperation, roaming their pack's land, made her stomach twist. But why target our pack now? Especially with Havoc's group visiting. It feels deliberate. He looked at her thoughtfully, then turned his gaze to the stone walls shining under the flicker of the torch. Rogues sometimes sense an opportunity for chaos when packs gather for negotiations. Maybe they intended to sabotage the alliance, or snatch supplies. Or it could be a personal vendetta. We won't know until we catch them, but we'll protect the pack from future harm. His words were steady, yet Elara discerned a deeper resolve beneath them, a pledge to stand between her people and any threat. Despite her racing heart, she drew courage from his calm. They took a final look around, then retreated the way they had come, letting the curtain of vines fall back over the cave entrance. Outside, the day had brightened, and the rising sun painted the waterfall with streaks of shimmering gold. Elara let the natural beauty wash over her, trying to quell the lingering sense of dread. Once they descended the mossy path, they paused by the edge of the pool to collect themselves. Arden set the torch aside, letting the dampness douse any remaining flame. He scanned the surrounding forest, then shifted his attention back to her. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Without your guidance, I wouldn't have found that cave. This area is more complicated than the maps implied." She inclined her head. "I'm just glad we've confirmed the rogue's hideout. Our Alpha should know. That way, we can set up regular patrols." He nodded, then gestured for them to move away from the noisy waterfall so they could talk more easily. "Let's walk a bit further. Maybe we can check the bluff on the north side." "You mentioned outcroppings?" They trekked across the slippery rocks again, heading toward a Lestradan slope. This route was dotted with sturdy ferns, thick patches of wildflowers, and gnarled tree roots that occasionally caused them to stumble. As they climbed higher, the forest seemed to thin out, letting sunlight pour into a small clearing at the crest of a gentle rise. The wind here felt fresher, carrying the scent of pine and distant wildflowers. Elara stopped by a boulder, resting a hand on its rough surface. "I need a moment," she said with a small laugh, feeling her limbs protest the steep ascent. Arden smirked, not unkindly. He too exhaled in a controlled manner, though he recovered quickly. "Take all the time you need." They lingered in that clearing, letting their breathing slow. A scattering of vivid blue petals lay underfoot, remnants of some mountain flower. Elara found her eyes drawn to them. In a strange way, the forest's natural colors reminded her of the sense of wonder she had always carried in her heart. Even amid the pack's judgment, she tried not to let negativity cling to her thoughts. Arden spoke softly, as if sensing her introspection. "Were you ever tempted to leave the pack and explore beyond these boundaries?" He didn't sound accusatory, rather genuinely curious. She stared at him, surprised. "I've thought about it, at times when I felt like I didn't fit in, but where would I go? It's not exactly safe for a lone wolf, especially one who doesn't shift." He nodded, his expression sympathetic. "Traveling alone is dangerous even for the strongest of us, but I understand the longing for freedom. As a warrior, my responsibilities keep me tethered to my alpha's commands. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to wander without obligation." Elara sensed an unspoken longing behind his words. She found herself intrigued by the layers of his life she hadn't considered. It must be a heavy burden, being responsible for others' safety all the time, she said. "Do you ever regret it?" His jaw tensed, eyes fixed on the sway of tree branches overhead. "I don't regret protecting the pack, but every scar tells a story of violence. I think about how it might have been had my life taken a different turn, but regrets don't change the present." There was a quiet resignation in his tone, one that resonated with her own sense of what might have been if she had shifted normally. The two of them stood there, side by side, each wrestling with the weight of separate unfulfilled desires. Neither tried to soothe the other with empty words. They simply allowed a companionable silence to acknowledge their separate burdens. Eventually they pressed on, cresting the bluff to check for any recent activity. No fresh signs of rogues appeared, so they decided to head back to the main settlement. The walk back was less tense, though the memory of the cave lingered in both their minds. As midday approached, the warm sun coaxed more birdsong from the canopy. Their return journey, while quieter, felt charged with the knowledge that a threat lurked somewhere beyond sight. When they neared the eastern gate again, Arden exhaled, rolling his shoulders as though shedding the weight of vigilance. "Your alpha needs this information. Let's speak with him." She nodded, and they found the alpha near the communal hall, already in discussion with Gavin. Arden recounted what they discovered, explaining how the cave had recently been used. The alpha's face darkened with concern. "We'll send out a team at once," he decided. "We can't let a rogue think our territory is free for the taking." Gavin looked to Elara, his expression reflecting guarded relief. "Thank you for guiding him. It might not have been easy to show a stranger the depths of our land, but your knowledge may prevent more attacks." Elara only inclined her head. She wasn't accustomed to direct gratitude from the beta. She turned to depart, but the alpha stopped her with a gentle gesture. "Stay a moment, Elara. I'd like your impressions as well. You know this territory better than most." She swallowed her surprise. "Of course." She looked to Arden, who gave her a slight nod, silently encouraging her to speak her mind. Clearing her throat, Elara addressed the alpha with measured calm. "The rogue may be alone or part of a small band. I suspect they chose the cave because it's close enough to the borders to slip in and out. We should also watch the northern ravines. There are old hunting trails that haven't been used in years, and anyone looking to avoid detection might use them. She paused, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. I can mark those trails on a map if you'd like. The Alpha regarded her with approval. Do that, and if you have any other recommendations, share them with our enforcers. He gestured toward the Beta and Arden. Both of you coordinate with Elara on these details. We want no more surprises. A bubble of astonishment lodged in Elara's chest. She had never been consulted so formally or included in security matters, and the shift in attitude felt both exhilarating and slightly unsettling. She forced herself to remain composed. Yes, Alpha. When the meeting ended, Gavin hurried away, clearly eager to implement extra patrols. Elara found herself standing with Arden in the courtyard, the midday sun warming the hard-packed earth beneath their feet. Wolves hustled past with urgent expressions, some carrying spears or crossbows, evidence that the pack was preparing for any eventual confrontation. Arden placed his hand lightly on her shoulder. You did well, he said simply. She stared at him, heart fluttering from the unexpected closeness. I'm just doing my part, she murmured. He nodded. I know what it's like to feel overlooked, as though your potential remains hidden. It seems your pack is finally seeing what you can offer. I'm glad. A mix of gratitude and shy confusion settled over her. She wasn't used to compliments that felt so genuine. Clearing her throat, she stepped away, sensing a need to recharge after the intensity of the morning. I should go draw up those maps, she managed. Thanks again for your help. He gave her a slight smile. I'll be around if you need anything. Then he strode off in the direction of Havoc's camp to share the news. Alone with her swirling thoughts, Elara moved inside the communal hall. She retrieved parchment, ink, and a quill from the supply closet, spreading them out over a sturdy wooden table. She began sketching the territory, marking known trails, hidden nooks, vantage points, and the route to the cave. Her hand trembled slightly as she worked. Memories drifted back of the times she had walked these paths in solitude, believing no one cared about what she discovered or how she contributed. Now, to her shock, she was part of a plan, maybe even integral to keeping the pack safe. As she busied herself, Nadia approached, a half-eaten apple in her hand. There you are. Word is you found a rogue's hideout with that visiting enforcer. Her tone held a playful lilt, though her eyes gleamed with pride. You've had quite the morning. Elara dipped her quill to shade in the area around the waterfall. It's been eventful. We found evidence but no actual rogue. Still, it proves they were there. Nadia perched on the edge of the table. And how do you feel about all this? I never saw you as one to crave the spotlight, but you're stepping into a bigger role. That's good, right? A few uncertain beats passed. I guess it is good, Elara said, though I'm still nervous about the rogue's intentions. And I'm also aware that none of this changes my inability to shift. I'm just hoping I don't let anyone down. Nadia reached out and gave Elara's arm a comforting squeeze. You haven't let anyone down so far. In fact, I think you're surprising people with how capable you are. The words brought a faint smile to Elara's lips. She turned back to her map. I just want to do what's right for the pack. Besides, I promised Arden I'd help pinpoint potential hiding spots. Nadia tilted her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. Arden, huh? I see how you say his name. She waved off Elara's immediate protest with a mischievous grin. Relax, I won't tease you. Too much. But be honest with yourself. He's clearly drawn to you." Elara's cheeks warmed, but she let out a soft laugh. "I'm not sure what it is he sees in me. Maybe it's because I'm an anomaly." "An anomaly worth noticing," Nadia remarked. "I have to head back to the infirmary, but I'll leave you to your cartography. Don't push yourself too hard. Remember, if you need to rest, you can rest." Elara thanked her and continued working until the rough map was complete. She labeled certain landmarks and included brief notes. When she finally stood to stretch, the late afternoon sun slanted through the high windows. She decided to deliver the finished sketch to Gavin so he could start sending patrols out. After that, she intended to slip away for a moment of solitude. The commotion of the day had left her drained. Gavin received the map with curt thanks, giving her a polite nod that might have been the closest thing to genuine respect she had ever received from him. Feeling oddly buoyed, she left the hall, weaving through the busy courtyard. Wolves rushed to gather weapons, distribute rations, or hold tense discussions about possible next steps. An undercurrent of worry rippled through everyone, but there was also a shared determination to protect their territory. Elara yearned to find a quiet corner of the forest, somewhere closer to the settlement, but still private. A small trail behind the cabins led her to a cluster of flowering bushes where she sometimes rested when she felt overwhelmed. She settled onto a fallen log, letting the scents of rich soil and blossoms calm her mind. In the distance she could hear wolves talking, children laughing, and the clang of metal as guards prepared for any trouble. It reminded her that she was not truly separate from the pack, even when she felt most alone. Her reverie broke when she heard a hesitant footstep. She turned to find Arden standing a few steps away, as though he had been searching for her. He approached with a subdued smile. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I saw you leave, and wondered if you were all right." She offered a slight nod. "I'm just taking a moment. It's been a busy day." He sat down next to her, leaving a comfortable space between them. "Indeed, your map has already proven useful. Gavin and I dispatched a scouting group to the north. Hopefully, they'll find any signs of additional rogues." She folded her hands in her lap, the corners of her lips curving into a reflective smile. "It's strange to be so involved. I've always been told to stand aside when serious matters arise." He watched her quietly. "You have a valuable perspective. I'm glad your pack finally realizes that." Then, after a moment, he added, "How are you coping with the tension? It can weigh on a person." She considered his question. "I'm anxious, yes. I want to help, but I also worry about overstepping. And," she paused, feeling the familiar ache of her own insecurity, "I keep wishing I could shift, to truly stand beside everyone in times of danger." Arden's expression softened. He reached out and hesitantly took her hand. "I've known wolves who can shift into powerful forms, yet they lacked empathy or insight. You, on the other hand, bring compassion and keen perception. Your strength isn't less meaningful just because it's different." His grip was warm, and she felt a rush of conflicting emotions, gratitude, self-consciousness, and something akin to blossoming hope. No one had ever looked at her as though she was equal to any other wolf. She let out a shaky exhale. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost drowned by the rustle of leaves around them. Their connection lingered, but then the call of a distant horn jolted them. Arden released her hand and stood, scanning the horizon with a sharp gaze. "That horn signals a patrol returning," he said. "We should go see if they found anything." With a brief nod, Elara rose. She followed him back toward the center of the settlement, a swirl of puzzling warmth echoing in her heart. As they approached, they saw a handful of scouts arriving in a hurry, their breath ragged from running. One of them was an enforcer from her pack named Rurik, a tall man with a scar stretching across his jaw. He pointed to the north with grim urgency. We found tracks in a half-burned campsite. It could be the same rogue. There are signs he might not be alone. Footprints suggest 2, maybe 3 individuals. It's not conclusive, but we have to assume the threat is larger than we thought. The Alpha joined them, tension written across his brow. Where are they now? Rurik shook his head. We lost the trail near the boundary. They might have crossed into the neighboring forests or doubled back. Without more scouts, we can't cover the entire range. A current of worry coursed through the assembled wolves. Havik, who had been standing in the background, spoke up. My pack's enforcers can expand their patrols if you give us clearance. We want to ensure the safety of your territory while our negotiations continue. The Alpha nodded, though a trace of reluctance darkened his expression. I appreciate that. We'll coordinate. Be careful. These rogues have already proven they're desperate. Arden exchanged a quick glance with Havik, then looked at Elara. His eyes revealed urgency, as if to say he needed to join that patrol. She felt a pang in her chest at the thought of him heading into danger, but she said nothing, only offered a small nod. Understanding flickered in his expression, and he turned to follow Havik, presumably to plan their next steps. Left in the courtyard, Elara realized the once celebratory atmosphere had transformed into a tense readiness. Wolves hurried about, exchanging solemn words. She felt a new sense of purpose bubble up alongside her worry. She would do whatever she could, though she might not bear claws or fangs. Her knowledge of the land could still help keep her pack safe. She found herself drifting toward the infirmary, seeking Nadia's steady presence. When she walked in, the fragrance of herbs and antiseptics comforted her. Nadia was kneeling beside a table, sorting small pouches of dried leaves. She glanced up and immediately discerned Elara's anxious expression. Sit, she urged, patting a wooden stool. You look like you have 1,000 thoughts swirling in that head. Elara sank down, running a hand over her eyes. The scouts found evidence of more rogues. I'm worried. The pack is on edge. Nadia exhaled, her features shadowed by concern. I heard. Everyone's talking about it. Our guard rotations have doubled. We are preparing for the possibility of an attack. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, but we can't be naive. A weary sigh left Elara's lips. I want to help more. I know I can't fight like they do, but maybe I can. You can help me prepare for injuries. Nadia interjected, her tone steady. That's an unfortunate reality, but we must face it. If there's any confrontation, we'll need all hands on deck in the infirmary. You're good at calming people, binding wounds. That might be just as crucial as wielding claws. Elara swallowed, a flurry of emotion tightening her chest. I understand. I'll do it. Let me know what you need. Nadia nodded, pressing a small bundle of bandages into Elara's hands. Sort these, please. Then we'll compile potions and tinctures for emergency kits. If a fight breaks out, we might have to treat multiple injuries at once, and we can't waste time scrambling. They worked side by side, methodically preparing for the worst. It left Elara feeling grim, but also oddly resolute. At least she was doing something tangible. Her mind drifted to Arden, imagining him leading a patrol into the dense forest to chase shadows. She hoped he would remain unscathed, that they'd find the rogues and chase them off without bloodshed. The day wore on under a tense cloud. Patrols came and went, delivering updates. At one point, a rumor spread that a rogue had been spotted near an abandoned cabin, but by the time the guards arrived, it was empty. This cat-and-mouse dynamic left the pack edgy. Late in the afternoon, the Alpha and Havoc met again, conferring about whether to postpone any future diplomatic meetings until the threat subsided. Havoc insisted they press on, claiming that forging trust during adversity was the ultimate test of alliance. Near dusk, Elara finally emerged from the infirmary, stiff and aching from sorting supplies for hours. The sky overhead was a tapestry of gold, orange, and purple. Wolves bustled to secure the perimeter for the night. She wondered where Arden was. She found herself scanning the faces of returning scouts, longing for any sign of him. Eventually, she spotted him crossing the courtyard, talking to Gavin and a few others who looked exhausted. They parted ways, and he turned, his gaze searching until he saw her. The look that passed between them was subtle yet unmistakable. Relief, warmth, concern. He made his way over, moving with a purposeful stride. "Long day," he murmured. "No luck so far. We've only picked up faint trails, nothing recent. They're wily, whoever they are." She nodded, eyes flicking over his face. He looked worn, new lines of tension in the set of his brow. "Thank you for trying," she said softly. "I know it can't be easy." He gave a small shrug, but it was clear the weight of responsibility pressed on him. At least no one was hurt today. That's a small victory. Her heart gave a guilty twinge at how relieved she was that he, specifically, returned safely. She dropped her gaze, unsure how to express her gratitude without laying bare her vulnerabilities. He seemed to sense her swirling emotions, though, because his eyes gentled as he spoke. "I'm going to grab some food and then patrol again. Care to join me for a meal first?" She hesitated, but a growl in her stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten much. "I'd like that," she said quietly. They made their way to the communal dining area, which was quieter than usual. Wolves were scattered, many out on guard duty, so only a handful remained indoors, finishing their evening meal. Elara picked up a simple stew and bread, and Arden did the same. They sat at a table tucked away in a corner, sharing a moment of peace. The stew tasted rich and hearty, the warmth of the broth chasing away the cold gnaw of apprehension. "Your pack has strong unity," Arden observed after a few bites. Even amid fear, they work together effectively. Elara considered his words. "We do care about each other. We just don't always see each other clearly." She paused, fiddling with her spoon. "For a long time I felt invisible here. Now, with all that's happening, I'm stepping forward more than I ever have. It's terrifying." His gaze was steady. "Sometimes hardship is what draws out a person's hidden strengths. It's not ideal, but it proves you're capable of more than you believed." She lifted her eyes to his. "What about you? Do you feel differently, being here with us, compared to your home pack?" He leaned back slightly, eyes distant. "It's different, yes. My own pack is large, highly structured. I fulfill a role as one of our strongest enforcers, so that's all I'm expected to be. Protect, fight, obey. Here, I sense a different kind of closeness, even though you have your hierarchies. It's more personal, I'm not sure how to phrase it." She searched his face, noticing the flicker of longing that passed across his features. "Less rigid," she offered. "We may have rank, but everyone interacts more casually once duties are done." He nodded. "Exactly. At times, I envy that sense of community. Yet I can't forget my obligations. My alpha depends on me." A lull settled over them. Elara studied the tension in his jaw, the subtle sadness behind his strong exterior. She recognized the burden of a predetermined role, though her own was at the opposite end of the spectrum, overshadowed by an inability she couldn't control. Perhaps that was why she felt so drawn to him. They both lived in a space defined by others' expectations, each trying to find a sliver of personal freedom. They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, occasionally sharing small, comforting smiles. By the time they rose, a hush had descended over the dining hall, and the last of the evening light had faded into night. Arden excused himself, needing to resume patrol. Elara gave him a soft goodbye, her chest tight with both worry and gratitude. Once he left, she let out a shaky breath, wondering when she would see him again. Outside, the moon hovered low, casting a silver glow over the settlement. Somewhere in the distance, wolves prowled the borders, on alert for any sign of trouble. She made her way back to her cabin, the crisp night air brushing against her cheeks. She entered the small space and lit her lamp, the dancing flame illuminating the neat bed and modest furnishings. She undressed with a weary sigh, slipping into a clean nightshirt before sitting on the edge of her bed. Tension coiled in her muscles, a reminder of how the day had drained her. After a moment of quiet reflection, she lay down, listening to the faint chirping of crickets and the occasional howl in the distance. Her mind flickered with images. The cave behind the waterfall, the footprints of rogues, Arden's gentle smile as he reminded her of her worth. As sleep tugged at her consciousness, she felt a tentative sense of belonging she had never known before. She prayed it wasn't fleeting, that the next day wouldn't shatter the fragile hope that had found its way into her heart. Slowly, her eyelids closed, and she drifted into an uneasy slumber, haunted by the looming threat of the unknown, yet buoyed by the quiet promise she sensed in Arden's presence. Dawn broke with a gray, overcast sky that mirrored the mood settling over the pack. News spread before the sun fully rose. A farm on the outskirts had been raided in the night, with livestock missing and signs of a scuffle. Claw marks scored the barn's walls, and the chilling stench of fresh blood permeated the air. No wolves had been harmed, but the brazenness of the attack proved the rogues were growing bolder. Elara stood among the gathering crowd near the barn, arms wrapped around herself. She watched as the Alpha and several enforcers inspected the damage. Wooden boards had been ripped aside, and a grim trail of red stained the mud leading into the forest. The farmer, an older wolf named Joran, looked shaken, but he managed to relay what he saw, shadowy figures slipping away before he could raise an alarm. Gavin spat curses under his breath, frustration burning in his eyes. Arden and a few of Havoc's enforcers helped examine footprints in the dirt. Havoc himself arrived shortly after, grim-faced but resolute. The entire situation was a direct challenge, a statement that the rogues did not fear retaliation. "We'll track them as soon as we can," Gavin told Joran, trying to offer a shred of reassurance. "We won't allow them to strike again." Nadia appeared beside Elara, gently laying a hand on her shoulder. "This is escalating fast. Be on your guard." Elara swallowed hard, nodding. Her gaze flicked to Arden, who stood off to the side talking quietly with another enforcer. Their eyes met across the distance, and he inclined his head in a silent acknowledgement of her presence. She felt the urge to speak to him, to hear his voice, but the tension in the air kept them all business. Soon, a large patrol was organized. Wolves armed with swords, spears, or crossbows set off into the trees, determined to find any sign of the intruders. Arden joined them, and Elara caught only a fleeting glimpse of him striding away, brow furrowed in grim focus. Havoc stayed behind with the Alpha to strategize. No one could ignore the possibility that the rogues might try a surprise attack on the settlement itself. Elara felt adrift, unsure how best to help. She considered returning to the infirmary to assist Nadia, but her thoughts drifted to the quieter spaces she knew in the forest, places the rogues might exploit. Her sense of responsibility urged her not to remain idle. Gathering her courage, she headed to the communal hall, where she found Gavin and a handful of other wolves examining a large territory map spread across a table. "Do you have a moment?" she ventured, heart pounding at the boldness of interrupting. Gavin glanced up, tension etched into his features. "What is it?" Elara took a steadying breath. "I know I'm not part of the patrol, but I'm familiar with the farmlands surrounding woods. There's a ravine due north, near a bend in the river. If the rogues were bold enough to raid the livestock, they might flee through terrain that's harder to track. I can show you on the map." Curiosity flickered in Gavin's eyes. He stepped aside, allowing her to point to the relevant spot. She explained that the ravine's thick underbrush could mask footprints, and a shallow cave at the base of a cliff provided a hidden escape route to adjacent territories. Gavin exchanged a glance with the Alpha. The Alpha, who had just entered, nodded. "That's a possibility we should consider. Gavin, send a smaller reconnaissance team there. Elara, if you're willing, guide them." Shock radiated through her. She never expected the Alpha to trust her with such a task. She forced a steady nod. "I'll do my best." Within minutes, she found herself leading a group of 3 wolves, each armed and ready. They seemed uncertain about taking orders from an unshifted Omega, but the Alpha's decree silenced any protest. As they departed the settlement, Elara stifled her nerves. She focused on navigating the farmland's perimeter, crossing low stone walls and winding through a cluster of oaks that marked the transition from cultivated land to forest. The wolves trailing her were silent, their focus on the potential threat. Elara's senses were heightened by anxiety. She noticed every snapped twig, every rustle of brush. The sky remained overcast, a reflection of the group's somber mindset. Occasionally, she glanced at the undergrowth, recalling tales of rogues lurking in ambush. Her heart thudded, but she pressed on, determined to contribute. They reached the edge of the ravine. It dipped sharply, the drop masked by tangled vines and scraggly bushes. Water seeped between rocks, creating muddy ground that could preserve tracks, if any were there to find. Elara crouched at the edge, scanning for signs of recent movement. The wolves behind her fanned out, sniffing the air. After a tense moment, one of them, Mirren, signaled a discovery. Elara quickly joined him. Mirren pointed to a set of paw prints half sunk in the mud, leading into a narrow recess in the rocky slope. "It's fresh. Could be them." Elara peered at the tracks, her chest tightening. "Then let's see if we can follow." She led them gingerly along a slick shelf of stone. Above them, thick tree roots dangled, offering some handholds. The air felt colder here, and the silence weighed heavy. The only sound was the careful splash of their boots in puddles. As they approached a shaded ledge, the stench of rotting leaves mixed with a faint odor that raised the hairs on Elara's arms. Wolf musk. Angry, pungent. Her pulse spiked. She stepped carefully, heart pounding in her ears. The path opened onto a cramped cavern, its mouth framed by mossy stone. From within, a growl resonated, low and threatening. One of the wolves behind Elara let out a hushed warning. They drew weapons, stepping forward. She swallowed, forcing herself to remain steady. If the rogues were in there, confrontation was imminent. She knew she couldn't shift to defend herself, but she refused to cower. Adrenaline hammered through her veins. The growl intensified, and then a half-shifted figure emerged, hunching in the gloom of the cave's entrance. Yellowed eyes gleamed with feral hostility. He was taller than Elara expected, with ragged hair matted against his face. His limbs were elongated in a partial transformation, claws sprouting from his fingers. Another shape crouched behind him, similarly bestial. A hiss escaped the second rogue's lips, revealing elongated canines. In that heartbeat of tension, the rogue lunged. The wolves with Elara surged forward, attempting to protect her. She dodged to the side, nearly losing her footing on the wet stone. Mirren blocked the rogue's swipe with a swift jab of his spear, but the creature snarled, ignoring the wound. The second rogue sprang from the shadows, tackling one of the other wolves, who let out a cry as they rolled across the slippery ground. Elara scrambled behind a boulder, her mind racing. She had no direct means to fight at their level. Still, she refused to be useless. Her eyes flicked around for a solution. Something. Anything. She saw a thick branch that had washed in from the recent rains. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed it, edging closer to the brawling figures. The first rogue had cornered Mirren, who struggled to keep his footing on the treacherous surface. Elara seized her moment. With a burst of courage, she slammed the branch into the back of the rogue's knees, causing him to falter and let out a guttural snarl. It gave Mirren enough time to strike. He drove his spear forward, wounding the rogue in the shoulder. The rogue let out a howl of rage, thick droplets of dark blood splattering the rocks. Meanwhile, the second rogue continued to tussle with the other wolf, jaws snapping dangerously close to the wolf's neck. Panic surged through Elara. She gripped the branch again, searching for a way to help. Suddenly, a thunderous roar echoed through the ravine. Additional wolves poured in, reinforcements. Elara's breath stuttered in relief as she recognized Arden at the head of the group. He and several others charged in, weapons ready. The rogues, outnumbered and wounded, snarled in disoriented fury. One tried to leap away, but Arden's blade caught him in mid-lunge, striking a blow across his ribs. The rogue yelped, stumbling backward. Catching sight of the second rogue pinned under two wolves, Arden barked a warning. "Secure him. We need them alive if we want answers." Elara trembled, adrenaline pumping so fiercely she felt as though her heart might burst. She hovered by the boulder, clutching her makeshift weapon. With practiced efficiency, Arden's team disarmed and restrained the injured rogues. One was bleeding from multiple wounds, the other, pinned face down, let out ragged breaths. The confrontation was over almost as quickly as it had begun, yet the echoes of violence lingered in the air. Arden spotted Elara and rushed over, concern lacing his features. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, breathless. "I'm fine. A little shaken, but—" She halted when he gently took her hands, checking for injuries. She realized she was gripping the branch so hard her knuckles were white. Slowly, she released it, letting it clatter to the ground. "I saw you strike that rogue's legs," Mirren rasped, limping forward, holding his wounded arm. "Your distraction saved me." A flicker of gratitude shone in his eyes. Elara mustered a shaky smile, feeling her pulse hammer in her throat. She'd never used force on anyone before. The knowledge that she had contributed to stopping a threat felt surreal. She rubbed her slick palms against her tunic, hoping to calm herself. Arden squeezed her shoulder in quiet commendation, then turned his focus to the subdued rogues. One of them whimpered in pain. The other glared with venomous hatred, mouth twisted in a snarl. The pack warriors bound their wrists and searched them for weapons. Discarded blades and scraps of cloth revealed little, but the expressions of these rogues suggested desperation. Their feral half-shift, the raw fury in their eyes, it felt off, more than just petty banditry. Arden spoke to them in a firm, low voice. "Why did you attack this territory? Who do you serve? They spat and refused to answer, lips curled back over elongated canines. A hush fell as it became clear these rogues had no intention of talking willingly. The Alpha, who had arrived with the reinforcements, exchanged a grim look with Havoc. We'll take them back and see if we can glean information by questioning them more thoroughly, the Alpha said. Now we know for certain they aren't acting alone. Elara stood aside as the captured rogues were dragged away. A swirl of relief and worry roiled in her gut. At least they had captured two. Maybe it would shed light on the reason behind these attacks. Yet she couldn't shake the dread that more remained out there. A few minutes later, once the chaos settled, Arden returned to her side. His voice was hushed. That was brave, what you did. Foolish, too, but brave. There was a flicker of exasperation in his eyes, likely from seeing her in such danger. She offered a shaky laugh. I couldn't just stand there. If I'm going to help patrol, I have to do something. His gaze roamed her face, concern mingling with deep admiration. I know, and I'm grateful. Let's get you back to the settlement. He turned to Mirren and the others. We'll escort you. Any injuries need to be treated. The group headed back, adrenaline slowly seeping from their bodies, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Elara felt each step like a weight dragging at her limbs. Yet she also sensed an odd surge of empowerment. She had helped in a fight, even without shifting. As if her body might catch up to her spirit, the flicker of that old longing for a wolf form ignited again, but she tried not to dwell on it. That path had always led to disappointment. Upon reaching the settlement, they found a crowd gathered. Anxious eyes turned to the returning group. News traveled swiftly that two rogues had been captured, fanning curiosity and apprehension. Nadia rushed forward to check for wounds, ushering those who were bleeding into the infirmary. Elara went with them, helping steady one of the wolves. Though not severely injured, he was still unsteady on his feet. Nadia directed Elara to assist with rinsing and bandaging injuries. The once quiet infirmary became a flurry of triage. Elara's hands trembled as she cleaned cuts, but she forced herself to remain calm. Everyone around her seemed equally frazzled, but they fell into the efficient dance of caretaker and patient. When the worst of the injuries were tended, Elara stepped outside to get some air. The daylight had grown harsh, and the wind carried tension through the trees. She found Arden leaning against a wall, arms crossed, speaking with Havoc in low tones. Their conversation ended as she approached. Havoc turned to her, his expression inscrutable. I hear you fought bravely out there. We owe you thanks for your knowledge of the land and your quick thinking. Elara offered a small, respectful bow. I only did what needed to be done. Havoc nodded, then shifted his gaze between her and Arden. I need to check on the Alpha and see how the interrogation goes. If either of you learn anything else about potential hiding spots, share it immediately. Then he walked off, leaving them alone. Arden exhaled. We'll have to see if these rogues talk. If they don't, we might not know their true motives until more attacks occur. Elara shivered at that possibility. I hope it doesn't come to that. We're already stretched thin. He touched her elbow gently, guiding her away from the stream of passers-by. How are you doing? You looked pale when I found you. She glanced down, feeling a pulse of vulnerability. I'm all right, just shaken. I never expected to be in the middle of a fight like that. His expression was laced with sympathy. That's understandable. Fighting is frightening, even for those who do it regularly. He paused, hesitating, as if weighing his words. Why don't we take a walk? A short one, just around the cabins. You could use some air, and I'd like to know more about how you're handling this. She agreed, grateful for the offer. Together, they skirted the edges of the main buildings. Wolves bustled everywhere, that they managed to find a quieter path behind the storage huts where stacked firewood and spare supplies were kept. The dirt path curved past rows of tall grasses rustling in the wind. "I've lived here my whole life," Elara began, voice subdued. "And for most of it, I felt like I was waiting to shift, to belong, to matter. Today was the first time I truly felt like I contributed something. Part of me is proud, but another part is terrified." Arden listened intently, features somber. "That mix of pride and fear is normal. When you step into a role you never thought you could fill, it's disorienting. But it's also how you grow." She drew in a shaky breath. "I keep wondering if maybe I'm on the brink of a shift. Some wolves are late bloomers, but so many years have passed. Is it foolish to still hold on to that hope?" A beat of quiet stretched out. He didn't dismiss her question or offer empty reassurances. "I don't think it's foolish to hope, but sometimes life takes us down paths we never envisioned. If you do shift, it will be on your terms, your time. If you don't, that doesn't diminish the strength you've already shown." His words loosened a tight knot in her chest. She nodded, blinking back sudden tears. She was tired of feeling lesser, tired of wrestling with longing. Yet hearing someone acknowledge her struggle in an open, uncondescending way felt like a balm. They walked a bit further, letting silence speak for them. Eventually, they rounded the far corner of the huts and made their way back toward the center of the settlement, where tension still crackled in the air. Wolves waited to learn whether the captives would give up any information. Elara's heart twisted at the thought of more violence. She couldn't shake the notion that something bigger was at play, something that threatened to unravel whatever stability the negotiations had built. Not long after, the Alpha emerged from the meeting hall with Havoc and a few enforcers. Their expressions were grave. The assembled wolves quieted, forming a semicircle to listen. Arden and Elara slipped closer. "The rogues refused to speak," the Alpha announced, frustration ringing in his voice. "They only snarled accusations that our pack claimed land that wasn't ours. They hinted at vengeance, but we got no specifics." A ripple of disquiet passed through the crowd. Havoc raised his hands, calling for attention. "We must remain vigilant. My wolves and I will stay until we're certain the danger is contained. We won't let these rogues sabotage our budding alliance." Various wolves voiced their support, though uncertainty lingered. The Alpha instructed that patrols remain doubled and, for the time being, no one should wander alone beyond the main settlement. He concluded with a brief nod. "We'll hold another assembly tonight to discuss long-term measures. Until then, everyone, stay alert." As the gathering dispersed, Elara's gaze locked with Arden's once more. His eyes revealed a storm of emotions: anger at the rogue's boldness, protectiveness toward her and the rest of the pack, and beneath it all, a quiet devotion to fulfilling his duty. She saw that same sense of burden weighing on him, just as her own insecurities weighed on her. In some unspoken language of shared glances, they offered each other a sliver of reassurance. Several hours crawled by. Elara stayed busy, assisting in the infirmary and making sure the injured had enough supplies. Whenever the adrenaline of the battle wore off, she felt a wave of exhaustion close in, but she refused to stop. She worried that if she allowed herself to rest, her mind would spiral into dark what-ifs about the rogue's next move. At one point, Nadia insisted she pause for a quick meal, pressing bread and dried fruit into her hands. But it tasted like dust in her mouth. By evening, the pack gathered for the assembly. Lanterns and torches lit the clearing, and a somber hush fell as the Alpha addressed the crowd. He outlined the new patrol routes, assigned watch shifts, and reiterated the need for caution. Havik stepped forward as well, promising the unwavering support of his enforcers. He vowed not to abandon this territory or the negotiations until every threat had been neutralized. Arden was chosen to coordinate nighttime watch with the Beta. When the meeting concluded, Elara drifted near him, drawn by a force that felt as natural as breathing. She watched as he conferred with Gavin, their voices clipped and strategic. The Beta soon left, leaving them alone by a torch that flickered in the gentle breeze. Arden turned to her, expression thoughtful. "I'll be out on patrol most of the night. You should get some rest." She studied the shadows under his eyes. "You need rest too, though." He gave a dry chuckle. "I doubt my mind would let me sleep. Not while rogues lurk in the dark." Then his tone softened. "But maybe you can do something for me. Try to sleep. Try to ease your worry if you can. We'll handle it." The sincerity in his voice nearly brought tears to her eyes. She wanted to offer him comfort, to do something to lighten his load. Instead, she only nodded. "I'll try." Time felt like it slowed as they regarded each other. The tumult of the day framed this quiet moment, a fragile pause before whatever next wave of conflict awaited. Then a howl from the perimeter signaled the patrol's assembly, and Arden stepped back, tension returning to his posture. "I have to go." Before he could turn away, Elara impulsively reached for his hand. He paused, surprise flickering across his face, but he allowed her fingers to curl around his. "Be safe," she whispered. His expression warmed. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I will." Then he slipped from her grasp and vanished into the crowd, a lone figure among many departing wolves. The final glimpses of him, stepping into the darkness, left her stomach knotted. She could only hope the night would pass without further tragedy. She trudged to her cabin, feet heavy. The interior was shadowy, lit only by a small lamp she had left burning. She managed to wash up and change into more comfortable clothes, her mind drifting to images of the ravine battle. Each time she closed her eyes, she recalled the rogue's snarling face and the flash of claws. Her nerves jangled at the memory. She sat on the edge of her bed, exhaling a long sigh. Sleep felt unattainable. Yet as she settled back against the pillow, a deep exhaustion claimed her, overwhelming her scattered thoughts. Gradually her eyelids drooped. The last thing she registered was the distant sound of howls echoing across the territory, a mix of sentries standing guard and the subtle presence of a warrior's promise drifting on the wind. Hours passed in a hazy slumber. At some point, a dream took hold. Elara found herself in a vast forest of silver trees, moonlight dancing across every leaf. She walked barefoot, the soft loam cool under her toes. A sense of restlessness thrummed in her chest. The wind murmured her name, beckoning her deeper into the moonlit grove. She followed, heart hammering. Then, ahead, she glimpsed a luminous shape. A wolf with fur pale as starlight, poised beneath an ancient oak. Its eyes glowed, reflecting her own longing. She reached out, and the wolf bowed its head, as if inviting her to merge with its power. A surge of light enveloped her, warm and comforting, promising acceptance. Then she jolted awake, heart pounding, sweat beading on her brow. She sat up, disoriented in the darkness of her cabin. The echo of that dream wolf still resonated, stirring a strange mixture of hope and sadness. Why did it have to be a dream? She pressed trembling fingers to her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. Something felt different, though she couldn't explain how. She sensed an odd tingling under her skin, as if her body was brimming with potential energy she had never noticed. It faded after a few seconds, leaving her with an unsteady breath. The night was still, punctuated only by the quiet hush of wind. She looked out the window, noticing the full moon drifting through the clouds, illuminating the clearing outside. Her entire life she had watched her packmates shift under that moonlit sky, running in their wolf forms, howling in celebration. She had never joined them. Now, something about this moonlight felt alive, like a gentle whisper reminding her of what could be. With a rush of impulsiveness, she stood, pulling on a cloak and stepping outside. She needed air, needed to feel the moon's glow on her face. The settlement was mostly dark, a few lamps flickering on porches or in windows where watchful eyes stayed alert. She drifted toward the communal fire pit, unlit at this hour. The wide circle of stones and charred logs looked lonely under the lunar sheen. She closed her eyes, letting the night's quiet embrace her. The forest beyond the cabins remained silent. No howls, no sign of conflict. She whispered a soft prayer to whatever forces governed her fate. A plea for clarity, for strength, for acceptance. A gentle breeze lifted her hair, causing her to inhale sharply. That same tingling sensation slid beneath her skin, subtle yet unmistakable. She found her breathing hitching, unsure if it was real or a manifestation of her longing. Then footsteps approached. Her eyes flew open to see a familiar silhouette emerging from the gloom, Arden, returning from his patrol. He looked exhausted, his hair damp with sweat, his clothing muddied from the night's work. When he saw her, his eyes widened in concern. "Elara," he said, breath ragged. "What are you doing out here? It's the middle of the night." She didn't know how to explain the restless pull that had driven her from bed. "I couldn't sleep. I kept dreaming." Her voice trailed off, the memory of the silver wolf flickering in her mind. He walked closer, his expression softening as he studied her face. "No more rogue attacks tonight, if that's what worries you." The patrol was uneventful, aside from tracking old trails. "We think they're lying low." She nodded, though the tension in her chest hadn't subsided. Standing this close to him under the moonlight, she noticed new scratches on his forearm and a bruise forming near his collarbone. A flush of worry seared through her. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, following her gaze to the bruise. "Just a scuffle when I stumbled into some brambles. A minor mishap." Impulsively, she brushed her fingers over the bruise, her touch light. She felt his breath hitch at the contact. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the hush of the night weaving them together. The glow of the moon highlighted the angles of his face, revealing the tired vulnerability in his eyes. She felt her own pulse race, that peculiar warmth flowing beneath her skin again, sparking a deep yearning that went beyond her usual self-doubt. A trembling whisper escaped her. "I'm so afraid, yet also so alive right now." His gaze held hers, a flicker of understanding passing between them. The tension in the air was thick, charged with possibility. Without speaking, he reached up to cradle her cheek in his palm, his thumb lightly brushing away the night's chill from her skin. The gentleness of that touch ignited an ache in her chest that held both longing and comfort. "Elara," he murmured, "you don't have to face this alone. You never did." She felt tears threaten to well, a strange mixture of relief and sadness flooding her. "All my life," she whispered, "I thought I was broken. I thought no one would see me as worthy. And then you." He pressed his forehead against hers, cutting off the rest of her words with his presence, offering a silent reassurance. They stood like that, hearts thrumming in quiet resonance, letting the moon bear witness to the honesty unfolding between them. For one fleeting moment, she forgot about the danger, the pack's expectations, and her own insecurities. She simply existed with him, drawn together by something that felt soul deep. Their moment of stillness was interrupted by a rustle at the edge of the clearing. Both turned, startled, to see Nadia stepping forward, her eyes filled with equal parts apology and relief. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice hushed. "I was making a late run to check on supplies, and I didn't mean to intrude, but the two of you looked," her cheeks flushed. She cleared her throat, trying to compose herself. "There's news. The Alpha wants everyone at the main hall right away. We've intercepted a message from the Rogues group." Elara and Arden exchanged a quick look, the tender moment dissolving under a surge of alarm. He let his hand fall from her cheek, though the warmth of his touch lingered. She nodded, pulse pounding. "We'll be right there." Nadia vanished into the shadows to summon more wolves, leaving them alone again. Elara let out a trembling breath. "We should go." Arden's expression hardened as he summoned his resolve. "Yes. Let's see what this message is. Stay close to me." They hurried toward the communal hall, finding it already buzzing with anxious voices. The Alpha stood in the center, flanked by Havoc and Gavin. A cluster of wolves formed a half circle, all focused on a battered scroll held in the Alpha's hands. When Elara and Arden joined the crowd, the Alpha cleared his throat. "We don't know who delivered this," he stated, voice taut. "One of our scouts found it pinned to a tree with a knife near the southern border. It reads like a warning, or a challenge." He unfurled the scroll, scanning it quickly before reading aloud. "To the thieves of territory you do not own, your days of comfort are over. We claim what was stolen. We take what belongs to us by force if necessary. Surrender your new alliance, relinquish the land beyond the waterfall, or blood will flood your fields, your false negotiations will burn. The night is ours. This is your final chance." A shockwave of anger and dismay coursed through the assembly. Walls exchanged worried looks. The mention of the waterfall territory struck Elara with dread. Was that the reason for the cave hideout? Did these rogues believe the land truly belonged to them? Havoc stiffened beside the Alpha, fists clenched. Gavin's face was a stormy mask. Everyone realized this note escalated the conflict to a direct ultimatum. "We've never stolen land from any pack," someone muttered. "This is madness. They're likely using old grudges or misinformation," Arden said, stepping forward. "Either they've been lied to, or they're twisting historical boundaries for their own gain." Havoc nodded grimly. "This could be a rogue faction that once allied with a lost pack, or they might be trying to exploit old disputes. Regardless, we can't let them intimidate us." The Alpha's gaze swept over the crowd, taking stock of the fear simmering there. "We will not yield to threats," he declared. "Our alliance stands. We will defend our territory. But we must prepare for the possibility that these rogues will launch a full-scale attack." He lifted a hand, stifling murmurs of alarm. "Remain calm. We have numbers, unity, and knowledge of the land." A wave of uneasy acceptance rippled through the group. Elara felt a knot in her stomach, remembering the rogues' bold attacks and cunning tactics. She glanced at Arden, who seemed tense yet resolute. Neither was naive enough to believe the situation would be easily resolved. As plans were hastily arranged for a larger defensive effort, the pack braced for a final confrontation. The wolves were organized into squads, each assigned a specific area of the border to fortify. Havoc and his strongest warriors would split up to reinforce crucial points. The Alpha designated Elara to remain in the settlement's core, assisting with strategy updates due to her intimate knowledge of local terrain, and, if needed, supporting the infirmary. She wanted to argue that she could do more, but a pointed look from Arden told her it would be unwise to defy the Alpha publicly. He came to her side afterward, voice quiet. "You're vital here. If the rogues break through, the settlement itself needs defenders. Don't underestimate that role." She clenched her jaw, frustration warring with acceptance. "All right, just..." She paused, heart twisting. "Be careful out there. They're threatening bloodshed." His gaze softened, a shadow of warmth piercing the tension. "I will be. We'll see each other again soon." He lifted his hand as if to touch her cheek, but this time, mindful of their surroundings, he refrained. "Trust me." With that, he turned to join Havoc's warriors. Elara stood rooted in place, swallowing the lump in her throat. The knowledge of a possible battle looming made the night's earlier moment under the moonlight feel both precious and fragile. She could only hope that whatever was coming would not tear them all apart. The pack spent the rest of the night preparing, building barricades, sharpening weapons, positioning scouts. Elara moved between the makeshift fortifications, providing details on the terrain for each team. Exhaustion dragged at her, but she refused to rest. Nadia, who organized medical stations in several key spots, nodded wearily when Elara volunteered to help. At this point, an extra pair of hands is always welcome. Just before dawn, a hush settled on the settlement. The wolves, though tired, were ready for a confrontation. Many had dozed off, snatching moments of rest. Elara perched on the steps of the infirmary, arms folded tightly against the chill. She scanned the dark silhouettes of the forest edges, waiting for any movement. An eerie quiet ruled the pre-dawn hours, broken only by the muted footsteps of guards. When the attack came, it erupted with terrifying suddenness. Howls rose in the darkness, followed by snarls and the clash of weapons. Torches blazed at the far edge of the clearing, illuminating shapes in the gloom. The rogues rushed in from multiple angles, a chaotic surge of half-shifted figures brandishing crude swords and claws. The pack responded instantly. Wolves howled their alarm, racing to defend the barricades. The clang of metal rang through the settlement. Elara's heart thundered. She spotted the Alpha rallying a group to the western flank, while Havoc and his enforcers counterattacked on the east. The night became a whirl of motion. Snarls, shouts, flashes of steel. Sparks flew where weapons met, and the acrid scent of fear and blood tainted the air. Elara hurried to the nearest vantage point, scanning the chaos, searching for any sign of Arden. She saw glimpses of the Beta grappling with a rogue, saw one of Havoc's lieutenants tackling another. The roiling mass of bodies made it difficult to track who was winning. Wolves roared in defiance, refusing to let the intruders advance. Then she saw him, Arden, locked in combat with a massive rogue near the old oak. The rogue swung a wicked blade, and Arden parried, muscles corded with effort. They exchanged blows, each strike laced with lethal force. Elara's heart seized as she watched him narrowly dodge a slash aimed at his torso. Another rogue tried to flank him, but a fellow enforcer intercepted, struggling to hold the attacker at bay. A wounded wolf staggered away from the melee, clutching his side. Elara rushed to him, helping guide him toward the infirmary steps. Nadia was there, quickly pressing cloth to the wound. "Stay with me," Nadia urged, her voice steady despite the frenetic backdrop. Elara turned back to the battlefield. The settlement courtyard was alight with torches and the flare of power as some wolves partially shifted, letting claws and elongated fangs tear into their foes. She couldn't stand idle. Another wolf near the armory cried out for help. He had been knocked down by a rogue. Elara grabbed a staff resting against the infirmary wall and sprinted over. She jabbed at the rogue, trying to distract him. He snarled, twisting around to swipe at her. She barely ducked in time, stumbling as she swung the staff again in a desperate arc. Her blow clipped the rogue's shoulder. It wasn't enough to incapacitate him, but it diverted his attention, allowing the fallen wolf to scramble free. Before the rogue could retaliate, an arrow from a pack archer streaked through the air, striking him in the leg. He collapsed with a howl. Elara gasped for breath, adrenaline igniting her nerves. A sudden movement caught her eye, Arden stumbling backward, his opponent pressing forward with savage force. Blood trickled down Arden's arm, and his breath came in ragged bursts. The rogue lunged, aiming to deliver a final blow. Without thinking, Elara dashed closer, heart hammering. Her mind screamed that she had no chance against a fully shifted foe, but she refused to watch Arden fall. The rogue sensed her approach and spun, a vicious snarl distorting his face. Time slowed. Elara raised the staff, but he slapped it aside with monstrous strength, sending it spinning away. His clawed hand lashed out, catching her across the forearm and drawing blood. Pain flared. She bit back a cry, fear roaring in her ears. He towered over her, teeth bared. In that instant, Arden charged back into the fray, driving his blade into the rogue's side. A piercing scream ripped through the air as the rogue staggered, eyes wide with agony. Arden wrenched the blade free, and the rogue slumped, collapsing onto the dirt. Blood pooled around him, and his breath rattled in his chest. Then, with one final shudder, he lay still. Elara stood trembling, clutching her wounded forearm. Arden let out a ragged exhale, staggering slightly. The clang of metal and shouts still echoed. That they had a moment's reprieve. She saw the concern in his eyes. "You're hurt," he rasped, voice thick with worry. She grimaced at the gash on her forearm, blood staining her sleeve. "I'll be all right. We need to finish." Before she could protest further, more rogues swarmed in, howling for revenge. The battle raged, a maelstrom of fury and willpower. Elara pressed her hand against her injury, fighting to remain upright. She kept to the outskirts, helping drag injured pack members to safety whenever she could. Nadia and the other healers worked frantically, patching wounds as quickly as possible. Torchlight flickered across twisted faces, revealing desperation and determination in equal measure. Gradually, the tide turned. The combined might of her pack and Havoc's wolves outnumbered the rogues, many of whom fought with reckless abandon rather than discipline. One by one, the attackers fell or retreated, scattering into the forest. A triumphant howl rose among the defenders, signaling the rogues' retreat. The battle ended almost as quickly as it began, leaving only the choking stench of blood and smoke behind. Exhaustion weighed on Elara's limbs. She sank onto the infirmary steps, pressing a piece of torn cloth to her wound. Wolves limped past, some supporting each other, others scanning the bodies for survivors. The Alpha and Havoc surveyed the aftermath, instructing the enforcers to seize any remaining rogues who were still breathing. Arden found Elara, his expression torn between relief and panic. He knelt before her, gently peeling back the cloth to assess her injury. "It's deep," he murmured, jaw tight with concern. Nadia rushed over, already wiping her hands on a blood-stained apron. "Let me see." She probed the wound carefully, ignoring Elara's hiss of pain. "We can stitch this. You'll be okay. Just breathe." Elara winced as Nadia pressed a poultice against the cut, the sting making her eyes water. Despite the pain, she felt an odd sense of triumph. They had defended the settlement, The rogues were either defeated or scattered. The alliance remained intact. Arden was alive, bruised and battered, but present. As Nadia worked, Elara's eyes flicked over Arden's numerous cuts and bruises. "You need to be treated too," she said, voice unsteady. He gave a tight nod. "I will. After you're patched up." His hand hovered protectively near her shoulder, as though guarding her from further harm. In the faintest glimmer of dawn's early light, the settlement took stock of their losses. Several wolves were seriously hurt, but fortunately, it seemed no one on their side had been killed. The rogues, on the other hand, had sustained heavy casualties. A few had been taken captive, though they still refused to speak. The tension that hovered over the pack felt like a bittersweet mixture of relief and sorrow. Once Nadia finished stitching Elara's arm, she insisted Arden receive immediate care. The pair found a quiet corner inside the infirmary, away from the worst chaos. Elara helped clean the shallow lacerations across his shoulder, her fingers trembling slightly at the dried blood. He grunted in pain, but stayed still, letting her douse the cuts with antiseptic. The closeness made her acutely aware of how dear he had become to her in such a short span of time. When they emerged, the sun was just cresting the horizon, illuminating a scene of exhaustion and cautious hope. Wolves slumped against walls, some weeping softly, others bearing stoic expressions of relief. The Alpha and Havoc were conferring in hushed tones, likely planning the final steps to secure the territory and ensure no lingering threat remained. Arden guided Elara to a nearby bench. They sat down together, shoulders brushing. She cradled her bandaged arm to her chest, mindful of the throbbing pain. After a silence, he sighed, voice low. "It's over, for now. We need to remain vigilant, but we've broken their strength. They won't threaten your pack again anytime soon." Elara exhaled, tears welling in her eyes. Emotion crashed over her. The memory of the violence, the fear of losing him, the burden of stepping into a conflict she never imagined facing. She felt his arm slide around her, drawing her gently against his side. Without hesitation, she rested her head against his shoulder, letting the tension ebb into a wave of trembling relief. "You were so brave," he whispered, pressing a faint kiss to her hair. "Don't ever doubt that you belong among your pack." She closed her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. For the first time, she sensed she truly had a place, that she was seen, needed, and valued. The knowledge blossomed in her chest, more comforting than the morning sun warming the horizon. They sat like that for a long stretch, ignoring the bustle around them. At last, Havoc approached, looking tired but content. He spoke quietly to Arden. "We're reorganizing. Our presence here has lasted longer than planned, but your Alpha and I agreed that an extended stay is necessary until everything is stable. You should rest. You've done enough for one night." Arden inclined his head, his arms still around Elara. "Thank you, Alpha Havoc." Havoc's gaze settled on Elara. A subtle smile tugged at his lips. "You fought well. Your knowledge saved lives. I hope you realize that." A flush rose to her cheeks, but she met his gaze calmly. "Thank you. I'm just glad we survived." He nodded in understanding, then moved on to handle other duties. Elara turned to Arden, exhaustion washing over her. "The pack, they're going to need time to recover. So many injuries. But maybe now we can find some peace." His gaze flickered with a cautious optimism. "That's my hope. We'll finish negotiations, ensure a proper alliance, and strengthen the borders. These rogues won't soon forget the defense they encountered." She noticed the lines of fatigue marking his features and felt a surge of tenderness. "You should sleep. You've pushed yourself too far. He considered her for a moment. I will, if you promise to do the same. A faint smile curved her lips. Deal. Slowly they stood, leaning on each other for support. The battered settlement around them stirred with renewed purpose, as morning fully dawned, the orange light of the sun revealing every scorch mark and patch of dried blood. Yet it also illuminated the resilience etched into each wolf's face. The hours that followed were a blur of cleanup and medical care. Wolves worked tirelessly to rebuild broken fences, dismantle improvised barricades, and tend to the wounded. Nadia flitted from patient to patient, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. Elara helped where she could, though Nadia insisted she rest after a while. Eventually, Elara returned to her cabin, the fatigue of the night's events pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. In the hush of her small room, she sank onto the bed. Her bandaged arm ached, and her head spun with a mix of relief and sorrow for the ordeal they had survived. Yet, as she slipped into a needed slumber, her dreams were no longer haunted by desperation or loneliness. She saw that silver wolf again, radiant under the moon. And this time it felt less like a taunt, and more like a gentle promise, one that whispered of a future where she truly belonged, whether she shifted or not. When she woke, it was to a quiet tapping on her door. She rubbed her eyes, disoriented by the sunlight that streamed through the window at a sharp angle, suggesting she had slept through much of the day. She opened the door to find Arden there, looking rested but solemn. He invited her for a walk outside. They strolled through the settlement in a daze of relief, each step reminding them of the battle's aftermath. Yet the mood in the air was shifting toward cautious celebration. Wolves smiled at Elara, greeting her with nods and murmured appreciation. Even the beta, passing by with an arm in a sling, paused long enough to acknowledge her. You showed real courage, he said simply, then moved on. Elara felt a swell of emotion. She never thought she'd earn that kind of respect. Glancing up at Arden, she found him studying her with a mixture of pride and fondness. They walked to a patch of ground near the old oak, where a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The day was warm, the air sweet with the lingering scent of grass and wood smoke. After a moment, Arden cleared his throat. The Alpha says your territory is secure for now, that the rogues are either fleeing or nursing their wounds. Havoc wants to formalize the alliance and then move on. He's offered me a choice, to stay here a while longer or return to our home pack. I wanted to talk to you about it. Her heart thumped. She looked at him, noticing the tension in his shoulders. You would stay here, after all we've been through? He exhaled slowly. I've done nothing but fight battles and patrol borders my entire life. For the first time, I feel a draw to a place because of someone, not duty. But I won't make assumptions. Emotions surged inside her like a rising tide. She took his hand, mindful of the stares of a few passing wolves, but finding courage in this new sense of belonging. I don't want you to leave, she admitted, voice trembling. I know you have obligations, but you've come to mean more to me than I ever thought possible. He squeezed her hand. You've changed how I see the world, he said quietly. I don't want our paths to diverge. Tears prickled at her eyes, this time from joy instead of fear. She leaned her forehead against his shoulder, letting herself believe that happiness might be within reach. In that embrace, she felt the wound of her arm twinge, a reminder of the battle that nearly cost them everything. Yet it also cemented the knowledge that what they had now was real, forged in adversity. Over the next several days, the alliance was solidified. Havoc and Elara's Alpha signed a compact declaring cooperation between their packs. Trade routes would be protected, and both sides agreed to share intelligence on any future rogue threats. The entire settlement breathed a sigh of relief at the new stability. The visitor cabins bustled with activity as Havoc's wolves prepared to move on. Arden, however, stayed behind, choosing to remain as a liaison of sorts, his official reason, though both packs suspected there was a more personal motivation at play. Elara found the rest of her pack's attitude toward her had shifted. Wolves who once regarded her with mild pity now offered greetings, even small tokens of gratitude. She was welcomed at the fire pit, invited to partake in communal dinners. Though she still couldn't shift, her role in defending the territory proved her worth. As the days passed, she felt an old bitterness dissolve. New bonds of friendship formed, including with those who used to underestimate her. One evening, as the golden sunset bathed the settlement in a tranquil glow, Elara and Arden strolled along a quiet forest trail just outside the perimeter. The rustle of leaves underfoot and the soft chirps of night insects set a peaceful tone. He slipped an arm around her waist, and she let her head rest on his shoulder. They paused near the stream, where the water reflected the fiery colors of the sky. He turned to face her, eyes alight with something deeper than mere affection. "I've been thinking about that sense of waiting you spoke of," he murmured. "Waiting to shift, to be accepted. I hope you realize now that your worth isn't dependent on any transformation." Her eyes misted as she recalled that dream of the silver wolf. "I know," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "But a part of me still wonders if it will happen someday." He nodded. "If it does, I'll be by your side. If it doesn't, I'll still be right here." She let out a soft laugh, tears threatening to spill over. "You're not afraid I'll hold you back? That you're tying yourself to someone who might never be a full wolf?" He pressed his forehead to hers, echoing a gesture they had shared in that tender night beneath the moon. "You are more than enough, Elara. I choose you, exactly as you are." Her heart swelled, a warmth flooding her that felt like the gentle glow of the setting sun. They shared a kiss then, a moment of quiet resonance that sealed all the words they hadn't spoken. The forest around them seemed to hush, as though granting them this private, sacred space. When they finally pulled apart, she felt breathless, not from fear or sorrow, but from the certainty that she was finally seen, cherished, and wanted. They lingered for a time, watching the sky shift from gold to soft lavender as the day slipped into twilight. As they made their way back toward the settlement, Elara felt lighter than she ever had. The path ahead held challenges, her position in the pack, the potential for new threats to arise, the lingering question of her wolf form. But for once, she did not bear these doubts alone. She was bound to a warrior who recognized her soul, and her pack embraced her not for what she lacked, but for the heart she possessed. In the end, that sense of belonging mattered more than any physical shift ever could. And if one day she found her wolf, she would run under the moon with Arden at her side, no longer doubting her place in the world. Until then, she walked forward with hope in her chest, trusting that, whatever came next, she had finally come home.